If you try to paint someone a picture that's not reality, Gen Z is going to pick up on that right away. Gen Z's detector for things that are a little off is so good. People need to have meaningful work and meaningful relationships to be able to perform at their best. If you're a CEO or if you're an intern, if you don't surround yourself with mentors that will speak into your life over certain areas, you're really putting yourself in a dangerous spot. Most CEOs, they're going to come into a role and they're going to have a strategy, the vision. But if your vision can't come down all that way, then it's going to be much harder to.
Welcome to the Agathos Consulting Podcast. I'm honored to be joined by Jarrett Swank. He's a great friend, he's a talented business leader, and he's currently a manager at KPMG Switzerland. In this episode, he shares practical tips on decision-making, team building, and harnessing the power of human and data connections. Let's dive in. Hey, Jarrett, thanks so much for being on the show. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me. Excited for today, excited to chat together.
If you could tell me a little bit about your background, how you got your current role, and go from there.
Yeah. So I think a great way to segue us a little bit together was I was 17 and we went out together, Seville Square. I don't know if you remember it, but it was dark kind of Friday night, Pensacola. Everybody was going out and we went out to talk to strangers about their spirituality. It was a huge kind of thing for me. I was so nervous about it with this communication aspect. I grew up in the woods of New Hampshire and the farms of northern Michigan. So I kind of had more experience like talking with wild animals than I did strangers. And it's, you were this individual that had this uncanny ability to really talk with someone one-on-one, make them feel comfortable, and then open up about things that generally you wouldn't talk to strangers about. And so I really found that fascinating. I was grateful for that. You're a great example in those early years of college. So background-wise, I guess that was your original question. So grew up in New Hampshire and Michigan. My parents chose to homeschool me. And that was kind of a neat experience. And it also allowed me to save for college. I worked on a farm for about 10 years to save up for college. Went to college. That's where I met you. It's also where I met my lovely wife and worked through college. We can take it from there a little bit together, but that was a little bit of my growing up journey.
Yeah. So how'd you get from like working on a farm to wanting to get into the roles you're in now? Remind me what your degree was in college.
Sure. It was accounting. And when you think about decision-making, right, and why accounting, how accounting, that's a general question. For me, it was kind of funny because my dad he's a pastor now, but he had an accounting degree, had been a controller for a number of years. And I saw that wherever he was, whether it was pastor, Christian school administrator, whatever he did, he was able to use accounting. And so then I was 17, I had two brochures in hand. One was to this smaller school where I would learn a specific, like a Bible degree. And then another was going to Pensacola for accounting. And so I said, well, let me go to Pensacola for accounting. So decision making wise, like that's a little light. I wish, I probably should have done a more holistic kind of viewpoint, got a little more in depth. But in the end, it really worked out because accounting was something that it was such a broad thing that you could learn the skill. And if you kind of worked hard at it, you could transition from that farm kid in northern Michigan to then where I am today over here in Switzerland.
And then you went on after your bachelor's to get a master's, right?
That's right. About junior year, I actually came back to school and got married. And I would say that's kind of a pivotal point in my life because before, so I was, again, I kind of thought I knew what I was doing freshman, sophomore year, made a big mistake, actually got kicked out of school. And that pivotal moment really helped me because I went up to Indiana, worked at this tech internship and started getting serious about life. And so I realized at that point, one of the principles that sticks with me to today, and that's really just own your outcomes. So I realized that there was nobody I could point fingers at and say, well, I was responsible. And that's kind of the attitude that I still have today is you're responsible for your actions. You need to own your outcomes. So at that moment, got a lot of advice from mentors. It was a very emotional time for me. It was a very difficult time for me. I ended up losing about $20,000 and then went to this tech startup in Indiana. They were so kind to me, took care of me. I think they knew I was going through this kind of traumatic experience. They let me go with them to Chicago, let me work in the engineering department, in the accounting department, the finance department, meet all these people, really gave me a great opportunity. Then I went back to Florida and then I just started working, because then I thought, well, I know this girl He's the love of my life. I want to make her my partner. I want to have a great life with her, but I need something that's going to be my foundation. So I was sitting up in the school library reading some accounting magazines, came across an article written by KPMG. They were talking about this data and analytic program. And I was just fascinated by it because I didn't have the money to go to grad school. Each year, I would go back, work on the farm, save just enough to school, come back, work hard in school to then go back, repeat. But I didn't have enough money to go to a program like that then would enable me to get my CPA. So the deal was KPMG, they paid for my grad school education. And I signed with them for 3 years. And so then it coupled that passion for people that kind of started growing their undergrad with this passion for data. That was kind of the start. So then I took that from Ohio State, went to Boston. And then for the last 5 years, around 10,000 hours have been in Boston, lived a little bit in California, and then over here in Zurich. So it's definitely a interesting, fun, meaningful experience, kind of that transition.
So I have to ask, since I don't know if you mentioned it, but I know you went to Ohio State. You become an Ohio State fan? I ask because I am a fan.
I did. Yeah. Okay. Yes, I did. I would say I'm a New England sports fan at my heart because that's where I grew up. But yes, I did. And actually one of my partners is from Michigan. And so there's definitely some, the last year's been a little bit rocky on the Ohio State side, but I did become a fan.
So I want to shift a little bit. A lot of the people watching the show are CEOs. And so I know you're not a CEO, but you work with different leaders. And so I wonder if you could share some tips or things you've learned in your years so far about leadership for those CEOs that might be watching.
So I think I come at it from a really practical standpoint. Again, I'm 5 years, 10,000 hours in, right? So that kind of gives you a little bit of a ballpark. So I'm on one of the biggest engagements for KPMG, talk to people all around the world. And so really have an opportunity to see what good leadership is. And I think especially today, it's never been more important to listen. And I know that sounds trite. And I think people, we can talk together about, intricate things like how to build a data strategy or something like that. But at the baseline, if you can't make your team feel comfortable, right, and you can't get them to a point personally where they feel like they can share their problems, they can share what's holding them up, then ultimately it's going to take way longer to roll out any type of strategy you have. Because I think most CEOs, they're going to come into a role and they're going to have a strategy. They're going to have the vision. That's kind of the role of the CEO, is to share that vision. But if you can't connect with people on the micro level, on the one-to-one level, if your vision can't come down all that way, then ultimately it's going to be much hard to implement whatever that vision is, whether it's transforming a company, getting it ready for this interesting AI. Everybody's talking about these buzzwords that are coming in, and it is coming, or whether it's just simply going back to your unit level economics and getting the business more productive, more efficient. You're going to need to talk to people, and you're going to need to engage people. And so, yes, there's leadership styles, right, that you see from the Jensen Huangs at NVIDIA to the Elon Musk, and I'm a little hesitant to, say his name out loud because he's a very polarizing figure, to the Ray Dalios, to et cetera. But when you look at what makes a leader, they're generally someone who can cast a vision, but then take that vision all the way down and then end up scaling that. And so the best do it at speed, but then I think overall that's kind of a pattern that you generally notice with great leaders. So it's interesting. I'm taking a couple classes, one's from Masterclass and others from Peterson Academy. And from Peterson Academy, there's one course in there about great leaders, actually. So it goes through Julius Caesar, Marcus Aurelius, et cetera, about 8 people and what are their characteristics. And so I think for someone who's interested in diving into what are maybe themes and characteristics, maybe not that you say, hey, Winston Churchill, I agree 100% with everything you did, right? But you can generally pull characteristics from those people. I'd really recommend the class because it's done by a historian, but he does it in a way that's interesting and practical, right? So then I can have a takeaway for then my team at work.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll put that in the chat. If you're watching this, of any other good leadership courses, feel free to comment that below. Be good to learn that from you. So Jarrett, what's a leadership framework that you like and that you've tried to implement in your role so far?
Sure. So there's a book, and I can show the book here, Principles by Ray Dalio. I read this book for the first time coming out of grad school, and it really became, aside from the Bible, it became a framework for my life. Ray has this fascinating overall framework for both business and personal growth. The framework is really built around principles and systematic thinking. It really helped me because coming out of college, I had all these emotions, right? From my experiences in grad school, and I knew that I had these dreams in my head. I really wanted to explore. I really wanted to travel. I really wanted to have a great relationship with my wife. I really wanted to have a great relationship with my team. I really wanted to build great teams and do really interesting work. But taking dreams and making them reality, right? Taking dreams, going to reality, you need a system to get there. And so Ray really provided that system to get there by using principles such as what I mentioned earlier, own your outcomes, or give people meaningful work. People need to have meaningful work and meaningful relationships to then be able to go and perform at their best. And so I highly recommend the book, and I highly recommend Ray just overall. I think when we're thinking about as leaders that are growing, getting to the next level, who do we listen to is the most important decision that we make. And I think in today's world that the information that we are in, you have unlimited ability to find anyone that you want to listen to. And if you want to find someone that agrees with you, you can definitely find someone that agrees with you, right? It doesn't matter where you are. You could find that person. Ray is one of those people that he does the best. And I think he's one of the closest to unbiased that you can say. So whether he's talking about macroeconomics or he's talking about how to deal with people, he comes at it from a way, and how he thinks is he's in their last stage of his life and he's giving this back for the ones of us that are on this journey. So I can't recommend it enough. This entire framework has changed my life, and every day something new comes out of it, whether it's a personality test that he does that I think is very data-driven, has provided insights on my strengths and weaknesses, much better than other frameworks that I've used. So I think if there's a leader and you're leading a small company, you're leading a mid-sized company, you're leading a large company, Ray definitely has something there for you.
Yeah. And we can put that in the chat for folks that want to check that out. I definitely am going to. Haven't read that yet.
Oh, yes. I'm excited. We're going to keep in touch on this.
A couple other books. I was talking to someone else today and added a few more. I'm a big Audible fan. I believe strongly in investing in education. Someone said it's good to invest like 3% of your income or higher in education. If there's something that someone recommends, I just buy it,
Where do you go for information?
I would say, learning information would probably be just the books I read on Audible.
Yeah. Sure.
I don't go look at the news a whole lot. I'll
Agreed.
read things.
We're aligned on that.
Okay. Read different websites, different like Harvard Business Review, different ones. So yeah. What about you?
Yeah. So besides principles, I can throw out a couple kind of newsletters that come in that I've just found fascinating, and they're a little bit varied. One is by Meer. It's called System Thinking. The newsletter is called System Sunday, but in essence, he writes articles like a system for powerful storytelling or something like that. That was one of the more recent ones. Basically, it's a short frame article that comes into the mailbox on Saturday or Sunday. What I've found is really interesting is you take the article and then you go for a walk, and maybe I talk with Anna about it. It's just little things that maybe you can put into play on Monday, which makes it kind of interesting. And then another one that's totally not business, totally not leadership, but Cain is actually one of my favorite authors. And I remember she wrote a book called Quiet, and it really helped me out because I'm right on the border of introvert and extrovert. And I think as I've grown older, I've gotten more comfortable with talking to people, right? It came a little bit of a long way since that Seville Square and shaking in my boots with you there. But Susan wrote this book called Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. And then she's got a newsletter that's about the quiet life. And so I find some really interesting things out of that newsletter that are just have nothing to do with business generally or work, but they're more on, for instance, one of the recent ones was a flashback to an article that was written in 2012 on why artists and why creatives are still important to society, right? Because I think that's one of the things that's going to be a big topic, right? We have all this data, and from a business side, we're excited, and from a left brain side, we're excited. And from a right brain side, it's challenging, right? It's a challenging time because you're taking these tools that basically you can type stuff in and it can spit you out a song or it can spit you out a video, and that's only going to get better. So if you're a natural creative, you're under an intense amount of pressure to balance your creativity, right? With this kind of feeling of it's tough to perform and beat that AI generate in essence, right? And I think you just have to look at it a different way. Like, we need artists because artists bring us to places that business on the left brain side can't bring us. Artists show us life and they show us creativity, and and that's been the best thing, getting married to a creative, because left brain married right brain, and she shows me things about the world that I would never see. Right. And so we need to put creatives and the arts and the music and keep them on a pedestal, even though the cost to create has dropped tremendously. And so I just found that article interesting. And Susan Cain is really fascinating. The last one is George Mack. And one of the interesting things that he gave is using the luck razor concept. And basically that means, like, if I go, let's say, Seth, you invite me to go downtown and meet a bunch of people, or I have option B, to be at home, make myself a burger. If you look at it from a luck standpoint, right, going downtown with you will provide me way more opportunity to who knows who I meet. Whereas sitting on my couch with the burger, right, that's generally not going to provide me much opportunity. And so concepts like that, right, where it just challenges you a little bit, challenges that status quo, that baseline, gets you out of that mundane. I think sometimes, Seth, right, it's easy in life to work on work and not yourself, right? It's easy to get in this road where you're focused on the first level work consequences. And it's hard to then pull out of work, pull out of my audit, go back home, right, and think, okay, well, what about Jarrett? What about how can Jarrett really give more energy to the team come Monday? And things like this, if I come to the team on Monday and I sit on the couch with the burger and I do that, week in, week out, right? That's not polarizing. That's not fascinating. And so then if I don't give you that energy, chances are you're not going to reciprocate that energy to me. And then in whatever relationship we have, it's going to be a little bland, a little blah. And so those are a few overall resources. Yeah,
that's good.
And I'm very curious to hear the comments as well, and pick up probably some more interesting ideas.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you said about Susan Cain, because I think it's important to not just read in the area of your work. So, like, I do some project management work. If I'm reading the PMBOK all day, or I'm reading, stuff just related to work, you don't get outside the box. And so I think it is important to read in other fields, reading creative stuff. And then when you bring it back to work, there can be things that you see that you didn't see before because of that.
So it's reading and doing things outside of work. I think both of those are really vital.
Yeah. So in your role right now, you're managing a team. And so I wanted to hear from you kind of like, how do you build a great team? Is there things that you've learned from your time building a team or working with a team?
So I think the energy you give a lot of times is the energy you get. And at the end of the day, I've found that true, whether it's East Coast US, West Coast US, Switzerland, talking to people in Singapore, talking to people in Brazil, India. The energy you give is generally the energy you get. And if you go into a situation and you're positive and you're uplifting and you're encouraging and you care about the person at their level, then chances are, yes, of course, you have the bad apples here and there, and you have things that you have to work with in hard situations, but you really limit those if you could come at it with the energy and the positive energy. And so I think one of the things that I'm really focused on learning is energy transference. And that's really when you can walk in the room as a leader and you can lift that room. And so whether the room is 2 people or 200 people, it doesn't matter. If you can do it with 2 people, you can do it with 200 people. But it's really having that ability to change the frame and change maybe they come in after a hard weekend, or as a team, you know that it's going to be a long week, right? And you have to meet X, Y, Z. If you could come in as a leader and lift a room when it needs to, challenge the room when it needs to, then I think those are important characteristics. And then the other thing is being empathetic. Seth, I think empathy and kindness, they go a long, long way. So again, when again, 29, 5 years in, have a lot to learn. But when I started out, I think I was very nice to people, right? And niceness gets you short-term wins. And when I'm nice to you, that basically means, Seth, if I work with you for hundreds of hours, I will be nice and I will try to do my best to set you up for success. And if something difficult comes, then I'll take it off your plate. And if you mess something up, then I'll kind of gloss over it and we'll move on. Well, that doesn't help you long-term, right? Kindness will help you long term, because kindness is saying, hey, Seth, let's go to lunch together. There's some things, right? There's some positive things and there's some challenging things. I really want to get you to this level, right? I see you at this level. Give that vision. And then, here's some challenges of getting to that level. And that's been a real kind of transformation journey, because I started out nice. And then I had some tough situations where I would have young associates, they would come in, we'd work hundreds of hours together, and then they'd go and they wouldn't do well. The reason why they wouldn't do well is because they weren't prepared. The reason why they weren't prepared is because I didn't challenge them on things. You can challenge in a very kind way, but it's important to keep that framework, I think.
Yeah. What's some tips you have so far from working with the Gen Z team and trying to coach them?
This has been a joy to talk to scores of people, whether they're some of my teams in Romania, Poland, India, US, etc. Wherever I've been. I think if you are authentic, if you can really talk to the person one-on-one, get to know them, and don't try, I think one of the silliest things that you see once in a while is people try to kind of put this screen up. A screen as far as like, I'll paint you this picture. If you try to paint someone a picture that's not reality, Gen Z is going to pick up on that right away. Gen Z's detector for things that are a little off is so good, because they have so much information, right? There's no way you and I can try to paint a picture that's not reality. And so for me, what's been important is to just, okay, hey, if you need me, you know that I'll be here for you. And then you know that I'll challenge you. And ultimately, you know that I want to see you get to this next level. The next level doesn't have to mean, especially at KPMG, where you see a lot of people come in, they stay for a couple of years and they go to industry, and they go and maybe they stay for a couple of years and they say, you know what, Seth, I don't like accounting. I need to switch. And we celebrate that. And that's great. And we keep the connections and we keep the relationships, and that's totally fine. And so the next step is very individualistic. And so you figure that out. What is the next step for you? Because if I know the next step, regardless of if I'm a CEO, if I know my people and how they think about things, then chances are I'm going to be able to empower them to be because at the end of the day, okay, we're talking about, I think for some reason people separate the tangible, personal, emotional qualities from getting things done. They go hand in hand. Maybe there was a time where you could go into work and you could have this mindset that you leave things at home and you leave. I don't think that happens anymore. Your people are they're used to just being who they are. And so as leaders, you need to accept them for who they are, take them for who they are, and really, help them if they have rough edges, et cetera. But I don't think you can expect people to just come in and leave, whatever's going on at home. From what I've seen and from what I've talked about, you need to build a relationship up to a point where people are comfortable talking to you. If people need time off, they're comfortable talking to you about it. Because what you don't want at the end of the day is you don't want that resentment to build, right? If you have this working relationship and you think things are going great as leaders and your team's on fire, you're implementing all these strategies, and your data's working great, but people are building resentment, that resentment is going to cost you in the long run. And so regardless of if it's, KPMG or whatever corporation or whatever the goal is, you really need to get to know people. I think that's Gen Z, whatever the next generation even that's coming in the workforce. I think getting to know them and being authentic leaders that aren't trying to paint a picture is really important.
So one way that I really enjoy trying to get to know people is I enjoy the aspects of psychology and all the different types. I'm just fascinated with people in general because everyone's so unique. You might be more extrovert, but then you've got certain times where you're introverted or whatever, and like you're saying, you're kind of right on the edge. So I don't know, have you dabbled into any personality tests, or how does someone's personality affect the team?
Yeah, it affects it in a big way. So culture and personality kind of go hand in hand, right? Because if you grow up in a Eastern way of thinking, that's very different than a Western way of thinking. If you grow up in Spain, right, you're going to think about work potentially, and again, painting a broad picture, you're going to think about work differently than if you grew up in India. And so I think knowing your overall culture frameworks is important, but also knowing the people and how their personalities interact with each other, and looking for blends and looking for clashes. And then when there are clashes, getting the people together and addressing the clash and working together is really important. when you think about tests, again, going back to this Ray Dalio. So Ray has this test that he worked with Adam Grant, and there was a couple others that I can't remember. But basically, it's data-driven. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes. It uses the best of the Myers-Briggs and other of these personality tests. And it's more for work. Maybe we can put in the link later. But what's fascinating is it kind of gives you an archetype for what you like. What are some higher level things that could be, trends to think about long-term, but then it also drills way down. And so for me, Seth, one thing that I've worked just hundreds of hours personally on is details. Details are my weakness. And so generally, you have in this personality test, it's going to show you, okay, this is your strength, right? And this is your weakness. And so for me, it showed me right off the bat details. And again, I see newer organizations, they're leaning more this direction where we go more data-driven, including in HR and including in people management. And then you're all, so you kind of have this shift towards data-driven, because as a manager, if I can see this report that comes out of PrinciplesYou, I think it's called, that report would tell me more than probably spending 10 hours with you, just because it's that precise. And again, working with Adam Grant and the questions that they ask, they really got, when I saw a report for me and then Anna did the report, and then now I have some of the team in Romania, if I'm not working next to someone, then I generally ask them, hey, do you mind? It's not required, but do you mind doing this report? Because I think we would get to know each other, and then we'll swap. I'll give them mine, they give me theirs. And then sometimes, we'll be in conversation, we'll be like, oh yeah, that's interesting. It's another one of those areas to watch, or this is another one of your strong suits that really came through. And so I think that is where you kind of have this blend of personality meets, that data-driven. I think if used positively, because you can obviously use things negatively, but if used positively, it can really be kind of an encouragement and an enhancement for sure.
Haven't heard of that one, so I'm going to check that one out. Have you heard of Pat Lencioni at all? Read any of his stuff?
I haven't.
He's got, there's like a million personality tests out there. But he came out with one, he calls it your working genius. And the thing I like about his that's unique from like Myers-Briggs or some of the other ones is he maps your working genius, what he calls it. It's mapped to like the life cycle of work, like of doing any kind of work in a business. So he maps you to what parts of the life cycle you're best at, and then what parts are frustrating to you. So he has your working frustrations. There's 3 categories. I forget the middle one, but essentially the thing you love to do, the thing you can do. Okay. The beginning one, like for me, I think it starts with like dreaming, like you're good at dreaming up ideas or visionary. You've got one that's called inventor. So you can actually take those dreams and build something from it. There's one called a galvanizer, where you actually rally people around an idea, or enabler, where you come alongside people and help them, assist them,
Lift them up.
I enjoy that one. That was one of my working geniuses. So yeah, it's interesting.
That would have helped me so much too. I think, starting out and in college and then now leading teams. So yeah, I'll look at that working genius. Very interesting.
Let's shift a little bit from teams to
data
and automation. I know you've done with your master, or what was it, a master's that you did? Master's, yeah. With your master's, you did the data and automation related to accounting. How would you say a CEO should make data-driven decisions?
I think when you say data, a lot of people go straight to the tools. But I think tools are only good as the people that are running the tools. And so I think whether you're a small business, you're a medium-sized business, you're a large business, you can implement some of this data and automation today. The tools have never been more accessible. Tools like Alteryx. Alteryx is fascinating because it scales on a massive level where you can use coding and et cetera and get really neat returns. But then you could also just say, well, I have 2 reports. I want to merge the reports together. They're really big. So it's very scalable. Obviously, Excel has come a long way as well over the past 10 years. And there's some, data tools as well. But ultimately, it really comes down to your people, because I think if you have people in the organization that can think through systems and that can go to the unit level economics, if you're trying to transform HR and you say, well, Seth, you and I are going to sit in a room and we're going to talk about HR and we're going to come up with this whole data strategy, but you don't know the payroll record process, the unit level economic process, it's going to be hard to transform that portion of your business. So I think you need to have people who can go, yes, from the top, they can see where we want to go, but then they take that vision and they go down to the unit level economics. And so we're doing this in the audit at KPMG, where we go down to the unit level economics for journal entry process, for revenue process, for et cetera process. And then we automate this and make it something really, really neat that then scales. Because again, if I can go down to the unit level, then I can scale back. But if I try to start up here in my data transformation process, then generally you're going to miss some unit level things that then they start coming up, and then, it could go like this. And all of a sudden you have this issue that you weren't thinking about because you didn't understand really how the data flows, where the data comes from, what are your keys or whatever else that you're going to use to then make this transformation kind of happen. And so I think people like that. And so then maybe the next natural question is, well, how do you encourage a culture of that, right? Because accounting is very left brain, right? Accounting is very, I book my journal entries. Accounting is, generally speaking, fairly accurate. There's not a lot of judgment involved. Well, then, of course, there's a lot of areas of judgment in accounting, but a lot of people think accounting's pretty straightforward. But really what you need for the data side is you need the creative brain as well. And that's where things get interesting, because you need these right brains, right, to work with the left brains. So you have your left brains in your IT generally, right? And they know how the data works, and they can tell you how the data works, and they can tell you where the data is located, and they can tell you what servers, et cetera. And then you have your business people that are over here on your right side, like you said, maybe your marketing people, right? The marketing people are going to come out from a different perspective. So as a leader, your job is you really need to bring those people together to then create that strategy to transform. Because again, it's easy for me to sit and talk to you about first level consequences, right? We need to transform X. Okay, fine. But what about the second and third? And that's where second and third order consequences, that's what you're seeing, whether it's, macroeconomic policy to corporations really thinking about the future to individuals, et cetera. That's kind of an important aspect for the data side.
So you've been in a lot of different organizations, multinational companies. Have you seen any good patterns of data management and analytics, or anti-patterns?
I think it goes back to the, coming from, if you don't have the right people in the room, you're going to struggle with transformation. And so, just on again, like we were talking about, doing a lot of reading. One thing from the Principles book is Ray, and he's very open about this mistake. Back in 1980, he took a very big bet that something would turn out a way. And so you're seeing a CEO take a bet on a certain pattern that would happen, right? And so whether it's data transformation, you're taking that bet. Whether it's, finance, you're taking that bet. And it turned out wrong. And so then that's when he completely scrapped how he was doing this, kind of the top level focus path, top down, really surrounded himself with, how can I get to system thinking? How can I go back to the principles based style? And so then he was able to really transform the company. If you're wanting a company, and again, I have no association with Bridgewater at all, but if you want to see a company that's just fascinating culture and what they have done over the past 30 years to really transform how to view macroeconomic policy, how to view investing, and they put some fascinating articles out. And so I think you could, as a leader, you could take that, whether you're interested in the finance side or not, and really say, well, okay, culture-wise, data-wise, et cetera. Because yes, we can talk about the systems, and there's a lot of podcasts that talk about the systems. You have some great, interesting, fascinating AI things, right? Everybody wants to talk about this, and they're fascinating. Ultimately, it comes back to the system thinking, because if you want to go big, you got to start small. Ultimately, when I've seen transformations happen, they've started small. Maybe the idea was massive. Right? But they started small. Sarah Blakely with Spanx would be a great example. She really started at the small problem level and then scaled to a massive company. And now she's trying to do it again with sneaks. So it's quite fascinating to watch. And you watch these leaders, they have the ability to cast a big vision, but then they'll also be able to go to that micro kind of unit level economic.
From your experience so far, what are some failures that you've learned from?
I think personally wise, the biggest and the best failure was, getting suspended and kicked out of undergrad school. And the failure really came down to two aspects. One was being arrogant. And I smile a little bit. I shouldn't smile about arrogance because it's not funny, but it's definitely humorous at the time because I worked hard and that's about all I had going for me. But somehow still, I really thought I had it together. And that arrogance gave me a massive blind spot that then cost me a lot. It cost me time. I lost a semester's worth of grades, cost me money, lost about $20,000, cost me reputation, etc. But it was a great failure. And again, thinking about Ray's framework, when you have instances like that, you have choices. And whether you're going to choose to either find an excuse or you're going to choose to get better from it. And so I was really blessed. And the second thing that I didn't have at the time was I really didn't have a lot of mentors. And so that switched once I went to Indiana. I think regardless of where you're at, regardless of what the dreams are, if you're a CEO or if you're an intern, if you don't surround yourself with mentors that will speak into your life over certain areas, you're really putting yourself in for a dangerous spot. So when I went to Indiana, and I remember it like it was yesterday, there was someone and he took me out and he invested in my life and he gave me a couple tips that really helped me set me on a good direction. And then I'd go to this tech internship and there was a couple more seasoned, the CFO and the CTO, et cetera. And then there were some men and women there that just invested in me. And I can't thank them enough. From that point to yesterday, literally yesterday, surrounding myself with mentors has been the key to then realize blind spots and realize ego barrier. Just recently, I've been working on, when you talk about failures, there's a difference between confidence and cockiness, right? You want to be confident and you don't want to be cocky. And so coming out of this experience, then I said, okay, well, for the rest of my life, I never want to be arrogant. That's a great goal and you don't want to be arrogant. But then if you swing the pendulum the opposite direction, right, then you give me a compliment and I just throw it to the side, really talking down on myself. And then really when I'm self-examining myself, it's lower than what it should be, thinking less of myself and not being confident in the abilities and the time that I put in, et cetera. What's a healthy confidence level I can have? What is a healthy self-advocate? One thing that I've always said is be your own advocate. But then here recently, it was funny. I kind of came out of this performance meeting. I was a little unhappy. There were some points. So I went back to the drawing board. I pulled up all, my reports. And then what I realized is I had self-graded myself lower than what, the firm and what these people around me had graded myself. So in essence, like my confidence level was very low, how I presented myself. It wasn't clear. And so then, that kind of translated into this outcome. So I think both of those, would be learning from failures. And then the nice versus kind thing, that was also failure to be nice, just nice guy that, always kind of glosses over things, doesn't really give hard feedback. And then now transitioning to a kind leader who gives hard feedback. I think those would be the couple ideas. And look, at the end of the day, is it hard work? It is hard work. So I think, I use empathy and I've said kindness and we've talked about kind of these things. Yes, there's a baseline that I think sometimes gets glossed over today. And the baseline is called patience. I'm 5 years in, Seth, right? I'm 10,000 hours into my career. And I have friends maybe that I look at and I'm like, wow, they're doing, they're off like a rocket. And I'm going in and I'm just being consistent, just being focused, just doing my job to the best of the ability, trying to empower the team, trying to invest in this energy transference, trying to invest in myself, just being patient. And so, yes, okay, if you're a CEO, I would say it's the same thing. You need to be patient with their people as they grow up. But then if you're starting out or if you're kind of mid 5 years in, you've put that first block of investment up, it's still patience. And I think in today's society, it's easy because we're fast scrollers, right? We want to fast flip to that next level. We want to level up on the game per se. But really, the tools you need for the next level generally are, you can learn those now. And the people you need to get to that next level are now. When I started at the firm, it was easy to think, well, as an intern, when I'm assistant chef, then I'll make a difference. And then I was an assistant, and then it was, when I'm in charge, then I'll make a difference. And then I was in charge and I had, let's say I had 6 people under me at that point. When I'm a manager, I'll make a difference. And then I was an assistant manager. I had people in different portion of the world, and well, when I think it's easy no matter where you are in your progression to say, well, but it's today, and it's investing today, being patient for tomorrow, I think are some things that I really learned. Some of that hard lessons, but they made me who I am today. And I'm thankful for that. Really grateful.
That's great. Yeah. I have the same feeling and learning from you, back to what you're saying about being confident versus cocky. I grew up learning that pride is not a good thing. And so
yes, of course,
I would swing the wrong way as well and be humble, but not confident at all. So that's definitely something I'm continuing to learn, is the right balance of confidence and being truthful with your abilities and stuff without being prideful. And then also patience. Our attention spans are so low. Our cultures go. And 30-second reel about how to make $1 billion next year or make 50K a month or whatever, and be like, oh, what am I doing wrong? And there's these people that are 20-year-olds doing it. But I think there's a lot of value in faithfully and patiently, day in and day out, doing your work to the best of your ability, learning, being a leader in your current role where you are, and then in each additional role that you're placed. I think you'll do much better than always jumping around and being discontent. Those are good thoughts.
Agree. Yeah, and I think if you surround yourself with people that can help you, and the beauty about today is the people don't have to be right next to you, right? The people that I've learned the most from, like I go on and on about Ray, I probably will never meet Ray in my life. I'd be surprised. I hope I do someday. I've met a few of my favorite authors so far, but they don't need to be right next to you for you to learn something from them. And also, Seth, you and I have this brilliant opportunity that we can choose who we listen to and who we let speak into our life. And I think for millennia, you really haven't had that opportunity as broad as it is today. You have the choice who you let speak into your life. And so the choice doesn't have to be the parents or the family or the towns, the people you grew up in, or et cetera. You have that choice to who you let speak in. So even today, I would say, it's probably 30% of my learning comes from inside the firm, 70% comes from outside the firm. Outside investment, investing in coaching, investing in going to networking events, investing in meeting a lot of people, investing in, this masterclass in Peterson Academy, and using my commutes really, really good. Because the nice thing about being over here is I'm either on the train or I'm biking into work. And so you could just, you can put that in, listen to it, think about it, and then share that idea. And so I think, today you've never had more opportunity. You've also never had more information kind of overload. And so then it's really up to you to who are you going to listen to? Are you going to surround yourself with an echo chamber, or are you really going to try to be open-minded and take, conflicting information and synthesize that together? And I think that's where you get the most kind of interesting conversations and interesting opportunities. That and just talking to strangers, going back, right? Going back to how we started, talk to strangers. I think it's, coming over here to Switzerland, it's been the neatest thing, because for 3 years in Boston, really built up a nice reputation, really did a lot of data things, worked with a lot of great people, worked with teams in India, et cetera. But then coming over here, I switched industries and countries, and it was a complete reputation start from scratch. And that was tough. And it's tough going from, one day you walk in and you feel good and you got your team and you kind of know what you're doing and et cetera, to then walking in and you're starting from ground zero, ground zero on relationships. And so from day one thing Ann and I really decided is, well, we're not just going to hang out with people like us. And so for us, we decided, okay, we're going to go and put ourselves in settings where we're hanging out with Swiss people. And we are hanging out with all these people around the world, and we're going to host events at our home. We're going to go to events. We're going to make the hard, that initial conversation, right? The initial time when you're talking to people, sometimes it's hard. It's hard to work through that initial conversation if it doesn't flow naturally, right? But working through that and then coming to the other side, just talking to strangers has been fascinating. I mean, now we have friends that 2 years ago, they were strangers on the train, or they were someone that they were in a different department at KPMG, but I wanted to sit over there in that department because I knew, so I need to meet these people and have these conversations. And then 2 years later, they're my friends, and we're going to, run club on Wednesday nights together, et cetera. And so to me, I think going, this full circle from you and me going out to Seville Square and you really showing me what it was like to talk to strangers, to where I am today doing that just every day, talking to strangers. I think it's so underappreciated in this data environment. Everybody's on their phones. It's all going through media. And I think you got to have an online presence. So I'm not saying you don't. But at the end of the day, if you can get that in-person connection, it really makes a difference. It really does. Because there's a lot of people that are in my age and even CEO level, et cetera, that, they're great online, but they're not great in person. And if you can kind of flip that on its head, I think, fascinating spot to be in for sure.
I think you might have surpassed my ability to reach out to people now. So now you're talking to me about it. It's good.
No, I don't know. I don't think so. I think, both of us are doing good and pushing ourselves. And
so one more question before we close here. Do you have a time where you had like a really hard decision to make and maybe what your thought process was around that, how you approached it? That a CEO that's just getting started or is just in the middle of a hard decision right now could learn from?
The first one that comes to mind was actually if I was going back to school or not. So, I had this interesting opportunity for the tech startup and they wanted me to stay on and they wanted me to really invest, and they had invested in me. They had given me a home. I worked hard for them. First one in the mornings, I had my little badge as the intern. And so I was dreading going back to school for a number of reasons. One, I would have to take the same classes, that I lost. I had to be in a different class that I didn't know. Again, this starting from scratch mentality. So it was a tough decision. And so when making the decision, though, I called the one person that came to mind. I didn't know him very well. I cleaned his house a couple times, okay? So we lived in Charlevoix, Michigan. My mom had this cleaning business at the time because, again, she was doing this homeschooling. She put her career totally on pause. And I'm very grateful that she did. She resumed it now. She's doing fantastic. And she really invested a lot in us. But on the side, she also did this cleaning business. And so one of the houses we cleaned, the guy was a former, very high executive at a company. And he had taken a little bit of an interest in me. And so I felt comfortable to give him a call. And so I gave him a call and I told him the options. And he said, you got to go back to school. For him, it wasn't an either or. He said, you really need to think long term and make the hard decision, go through the hard things, really humble yourself. Go back to school, finish out well. And that decision changed the trajectory, right? Because if I look at the trajectory the other way, it wouldn't have been all roses and the company IPO'd and, hey, Jarrett's this intern that did well. And so it was just going back to school, making the hard decision, going to Switzerland. Switzerland has been the best, most intense, beautiful time of my life, but it's also been the hardest time. It's a different culture. It's German-speaking portion. People are a little more reserved. You gotta give that positive energy, and it's just been this really neat opportunity. And so, hard decision: have a mentor. Don't do this alone. You got to surround yourself with people, whether they're people you're listening to, people you're in person. And look, I think, Seth, like attracts like. You find what you're looking for. If you're looking for trouble, you're going to find it every time. And if you're looking to make your dreams reality, then I think you'll find people who are looking to make their dreams reality. And that's where magic can happen. And that's what I'm most excited about for the next 5 years. So maybe we do this again in 5 years and look back. It's, I'm fired up for the next 5 years and excited for it.
So to close, you mentioned one book. Do you have any other books that you'd recommend people read on business?
Yeah. So I think Ray's principles, that along with the Bible, have kind of given me their foundation, I think, for making decisions. So besides those frameworks, one author, I'll give the author, because he wrote a couple books I found very interesting. His name's Johann Hari, and he wrote a book on mental health. And I can't remember because I'm thinking about his other book right now, but the book on mental health really helped me because I came at mental health and I came at marriage, and I came at, thinking about work and life at a very left brain, cut and dry, boxy framework. And the book really challenged me and helped me to understand struggles mentally. I think today, very many people have mental struggles. My struggles are different than yours, but I think understanding the framework And then understanding the solutions. When he was around 21, he determined that he really wanted to figure out how to be healthy mentally. And so the book is all about ways that people around the world increase their mental health. And I found it fascinating. We'll do a little homework together. We can drop that in the chat. But that book really helped me out to understand kind of that aspect for myself. And I'm still growing in that aspect. I'm still working on some hard things, still working to get to this next 5-year section. But that's what I would recommend.
So where can people learn more about you or KPMG?
So would love to connect on LinkedIn. DMs are always open for people that have big dreams and big doubts like me. And KPMG, you can just go to kpmg.ch or kpmg.com for the US and Switzerland branches. And we provide a lot of unique opportunities. I haven't talked about many of those today, but I think KPMG is really, if you look at it from a personal standpoint, they've helped me go from the farm, right, to Zurich, Switzerland. And so I think if you're a dreamer out there, KPMG is a great place to start. And there's fascinating people that if you have big dreams and you're willing to put those dreams in action, it's a great place to start. And then if you're a CEO and you're looking to engage a firm that really is passionate about you and it's really engaging you in their financial and non-financial world of ESG, et cetera, AI is coming as well. So AI reporting, et cetera. Then happy to engage on that as well.
Well, Jarrett, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate it as well. Thanks, Seth.